Great question came up a couple of times this week. First in a client call, and then again in one of my workshops this week. And the question was, I understand the positioning approach around specializing in solving a specific problem for a specific type of client. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to powerpositioningworkshop.com and I'll teach you our positioning framework. But that's a big part of it is specialization. Specialize in solving one problem for a specific type of client. Okay. And the question is, okay, I get it. Can I then, once I've secured that client and I'm now solving that problem, can I then, what they call land and expand and then solve other problems for that client? Can I then expand the relationship into other areas? Is that an okay thing to do? Am I a bad person for doing so? Right. And let me walk you through kind of how I framed it for folks. And I want to get your take on this. We'll talk about the pros and cons of the approach. My perspective was, yes, you can. Like, I'm not here to tell you can't do that. Certainly that's a viable approach, right? You go in, you specialize in solving one problem, you build a reputation around that one problem. And then once you have the relationship, can you then expand the scope of that relationship? Well, that's kind of what all the consulting firms do, really. That's a very conventional consulting growth approach. Yes, you can do that. There's an alternative. And the alternative is, instead of landing and expanding, you go in and you solve one problem for a client, the problem you specialize in, and then you solve that problem for another client and another client. So instead of solving more problems for the same client, you solve the same problem for more clients. Okay. And let's debate the pros and cons of both approaches, but does that make sense? You get the two directions here?
Understood.
Okay. Let's deal with the first approach. Now, this is very conventional, kind of land and expand. Mm-hmm. What do you see as kind of pros and cons here?
Yeah. So pros are, and I think this is one of the reasons that people lean towards this, is if I get in with that client and then I do more for them, that means I don't need as many more clients, which means I don't need to work so much in my business development, which means I can, just continue to sort of milk this relationship that I have, right? Which seems at first glance like a positive thing for sure. I think pros as well, once you're working with people and you're building those relationships and you're getting to know their business and you're understanding, what's going on around you, it can create a level of comfort. It can create a level of trust, right? Like all of those things that exist when a relationship exists start to happen when you kind of embed yourself and then expand what you're doing. And then I would say as well, it gives people the opportunity to do more than one thing, right? The excitement and variety seeking humans that some of us are, it allows us to go down several paths at once and try different things and learn different things and understand more about our process and what it is that we can solve. So I would say those are three things that immediately come to mind in terms of pros.
Yeah. And I will say, in addition to that, this is practically what most consultants will do.
Yeah.
Practically, you want a handful of good relationships. And yes, you may have specialized to land those relationships, but once you're inside, there are other opportunities, things that you can do. And practically most people are comfortable with that approach. There are some downsides though. What are they?
I mean, some of them are the flip side. One is if you are comfortable with that client or those clients and you start to do more business with them, they can just become your client, like your only client, right? Your employer, so to speak. And you can end up with too many eggs in one basket, for sure. I would say it also dilutes, this notion of going after different problems and solving different things dilutes your ability to continue to hone expertise in one particular place, right? You're not sort of sharpening that skill to its ultimate degree. Yeah, I would say those would be the two that immediately arise.
Agreed. So concentration risk on the one hand, right? So you getting really involved with a small handful of clients means what? It means you don't have 10 clients. It means you have, let's talk typical solo consultant, not boutique firm, but typical solo consultant, this model, it means you have a few clients at a time, maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. And that's being very generous, right? Like you probably can't be super entrenched with 5 clients at a time. right? So you have a low volume of clients, which, yeah, on the bright side, less relationships to manage. That's nice. On the flip side, concentration risk, right? You lose a client, it's a significant chunk of your revenue, and now you have to go out and replace that. So it can be very disruptive to lose a client or to lose a relationship because of the concentration risk. And then, yeah, I agree. Secondly, it impedes specialization, because now you're not spending all of your time solving a particular problem, looking at it from different angles, solving it in different contexts and in different environments, under different circumstances. You're now doing a whole bunch of other things, which will impede your specialization in any particular area. I think you can make a fantastic living doing this.
Mhm.
There is concentration risk, sure, so that needs to be mitigated. That can be mitigated. You can do just fine doing this, and there is an alternative. The alternative is you really embrace specialization. And by the way, path one can lead to path two, right? I'm not suggesting you have to go either or. One can lead into two. But path two is you embrace specialization, and instead of landing and expanding, you say, I'm going to solve this one problem for as many clients as possible. Pros and cons, Carrie?
I feel like this is a test today. So, I mean, pros are you build up your resume, right? You build it up more quickly. You build it up in a much more demonstrable way. You can, be very clear about the problem you solve. You'll have all of the case studies and examples behind you. I mean, that kind of clarity, both internally for yourself to understand that whenever that problem comes up, you can be the person that solves it, and that clarity externally in your marketing, in your conversations, in your positioning is exceptionally valuable, because people will then know what it is that you do, right? They'll know that Ahmed's the guy that solves problem A. Therefore, if I have problem A, that's the guy I go to, right? As opposed to some diluted version of this. Diluted, not diluted. And so, I think that I would say is sort of the number one positive. And the other thing I would say is, when I said before, for version A, the notion of being able to get variety through solving different kinds of problems. There's a different kind of variety here, which is solving the same problem for different kinds of people, right? In different scenarios, different organizations, different markets, whatever it is that changes around the problem that you're solving. I think it's also important to recognize that you can also find that interest, right? That variety. You can, see how it's not as boring as it seems, right? It's not as repetitive as it might sound, because you're dealing with complex problems, you're still doing this in a variety of circumstances with a variety of people. And so I think that's a pro here as well.
Yeah. Yeah. My big argument for this path, and perhaps it's not for everybody, but here's my argument for this path is you will, all things considered, like if we compare consultant A to consultant B, consultant A has a handful of clients they're very entrenched with. They might have positioned around a particular problem. Once they get in, they solve multiple. They've got 2, 3, 4 clients they're working with at a given time. That's consultant A. Consultant B does one problem for multiple clients, right? So consultant A might work with, in a year, 5 to 8 clients, including some attrition. Consultant B might work with 15 or 20 clients, right? Same amount of work, but the number of relationships is different. My argument for B is you can develop a much more concentrated and compelling track record faster, right? So let's say consultant A solves 3 problems, right? And over the course of the year, they develop a case study in case studies in all 3 problems, right? So their case studies are, on the one hand, diverse, but not particularly concentrated. And consultant B develops all their case studies, all their results, all their social proof in one problem. So they have more proof in one problem. And that proof generates ultimately a higher price, right? Because price is a function of belief. If the client believes you can get them results, the stronger their belief, the higher the price. More case studies, higher price, right? And so more case studies will yield higher pricing, but also more delivery on the same problem will yield more efficiencies in delivery, right? And streamlining operations and finding efficiencies and finding better ways to solve problems and developing stronger processes. And so what ultimately happens is when you go down this path is price goes up and up and up with more case studies and more results, and cost of delivery starts to go down.
Mm.
And so strictly from a business perspective, which we can't really ever address these strictly from a business perspective, right? But if we just look at that angle alone, consultant B should make more money. Higher prices, lower delivery costs, wider margins. Downsides?
Yeah. So, I mean, opposite to the other or the first scenario is, I don't know, call this a downside, but it's something to be aware of, is that you need to be on top of your pipeline, right? Like, it's not where
Yes.
you can't just sit back. Now, we could argue that you're putting yourself in a better position to be on top of your pipeline and, to have this clarity of messaging and clarity of approach. But it requires, a very focused approach to business development. So you can't just ignore that or set it aside or, get lazy in that department.
Right, because instead of 5 to 8 clients in a year, you need 15 or 20. And
Yeah.
granted, these numbers are kind of arbitrary, right? Like your numbers might be a little bit different. You could be consultant B with fewer clients or more clients, but all things considered, you need more clients as consultant B than consultant A. So yes, you will need to be on the ball. Like you will need to be seriously investing in marketing, in business development, and you can't see it as just a thing that you check off or a necessary evil. It is a strategic investment you have to make in the business to feed you the kind of volume that you need to be able to deliver to that many clients. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say there's also, I don't know that it's a downside, but there's a risk, and there's a risk of being out there with blinders on and being so focused on the problem that you solve that you forget to look around and see what kind of problems the market the market is experiencing. And I think it's important as we talk about this to say that we're not talking about like getting so entrenched that you can't shift or change or make adjustments, because you should be listening to customers, listening to the market all the time and making those shifts. But I think there is potentially a risk of being so clear about what it is that you do that you lose track of what is needed.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think it's important to understand that great positioning can make you very profitable and earn you a lot of money for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like no positioning works forever because markets are dynamic and markets are changing, and there will always need to be certainly in the medium to long term adjustments to your positioning. Nothing will work forever. Right? And so to your point, if you're, blinders on, like this is what I do and this is what I do forever and I'm never going to change, well, you're going to start to see diminishing returns on that eventually, especially as competition gets more fierce, people start to copy you, models become more common and conventional, market needs change, so on and so forth. So there does needs to, I'm certainly not advocating, even in the path B, as we're calling it, I'm not advocating you do the same thing forever and ever. I'm advocating if you can go down that path, you do the same thing as long as it's working, right? And as market needs change and evolve, you might need to change and evolve and then find the next kind of wave to ride until that one stops working.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be a timeline on any wave.
And really what we're talking about here is two philosophies, right? Sort of two ways of thinking. And also recognizing there's evolution, right? When you're first starting out, you may go into a client and you may solve 3 problems because that's the thing you need to do to put food on the table. And, no one would argue that's not the right choice to make at the time. And what's really important, as always, right, is that you're making these decisions intentionally and for the right reason. So even if you are hyper specialized, right, you are on path B, you are solving one problem for one client after another, but you get into a particular client scenario and something else happens and you decide, you know what, actually, in this particular case, I am going to expand my scope because I want to learn more, because, I have a particular affinity for what's going on with this client. And I'm going to do it this one time because it makes sense to me for these particular reasons. That's terrific. I think what we're really advocating for, though, is not falling into the trap of just getting pulled into whatever work happens to be put in front of you. that's where things start to get dangerous. You want to, stay in the position where you are still choosing, right? You are still deciding. You're still the one making the decisions.
Yeah.
And, with the healthy pipeline, with, solid positioning and consistent business development, that's the position that you'll put yourself in. And then you can do the thing that's best for you in your business.
Yeah. You don't want to take on the work because it's all you have, but you
Exactly.
have to solve that problem because it's what's in front of you and there's nothing else in front of you. And here's a common complaint I hear from folks. It's like, yeah, I got hired to do this thing and now I'm spending so much time with this client and they're kind of taking me for granted. Like,
Yeah.
now I'm just like one of the team, right? And a lot of folks go into consulting because they no longer want a job, right? And I think one of the dangers in path A, getting really deeply entrenched with a small handful of clients, is after a while, it can start to feel like you just have a bunch of jobs. Admin work, reporting, like you become part of the team. They just get used to working with you. And that's a pretty clear risk. To your point about doing, engaging and solving some problems when it makes sense, if it makes sense strategically. I mean, we've done that, right? And so for the past 7 some odd years, actually, it's precisely this month, 90-day Pipeline's 7-year birthday. We launched in July of 2018. And it is now, at the time of this recording and publishing, it's July 2025. So it's been 7 years. I've obviously been consulting in this space for longer than that, but our flagship program is 7 years old. And for the most part, for the past 7 years, we've been pretty darn focused, right? It's 90-day Pipeline. It's solving the problem of building pipeline for B2B consultants. And we've graduated over 1,000 clients, but we've had seasons where we did some other things. One that's coming to mind, Carrie, is we had another program that was for graduates of 90-day Pipeline called Operation Scale. Operation Scale did what? It solved the scalability problem for our clients who are coming in, building pipeline, and then bumping up against the capacity constraint and could no longer, sell more services, but wanted to scale. We had another program that helped them scale their team, scale their capacity, and scale their offers. We did that for a couple of years. It was a good experience. Clients got great results. And for other strategic reasons, we decided to pull back on it and double down on our focus, right? And I don't think any of us would argue that it was a distraction or a bad idea or not a fulfilling experience. I think it was all good. And we ended up ultimately reverting back to our focus. And that was fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm listening to this, Carrie, and I see the merits of both approaches, and I don't really know what to do next. What's your advice?
I mean, the advice is common, which is, first of all, know thyself, right? Understand where you are in terms of the growth of your business, understand who you are, understand, what the market looks like around you right now. But I think, the reason we're having this conversation is that without really thinking about it, consultants tend to fall into path A, right? They just fall into it because they sort of think that's the way it happens and they're just letting the business happen to them. And, to me, what we're really talking about is recognizing there's another path, right? Recognizing what the benefits are of that other path and going in with both eyes wide open, right? As you decide how you're going to proceed. So I don't know, and you may think differently. I don't know that there's a right answer here, but the answer is not to just get, pulled into the vortex of whatever gets thrown your way. The answer here is to, be clear, pay attention, and make your own choices that will get you the benefits that you need and that you want.
Yeah, I agree. I think my main message, and this is what I communicate with our clients inside our programs as well, is path A is a fine path. In the short term, it's a fairly simple way to grow revenue, right? You can capitalize on a few relationships and certainly grow revenue pretty quickly that way. I want people to understand that there's some downsides to that in the long term: concentration risk, being taken for granted, impeding your specialization, and that there is an alternative path that you can very easily go down on the back of path A. And I think my objective here was to simply shine some light on that alternative path.